What if the traditional roadmap to success that we've been taught, you know, get good grades, get the degree, get a good job, you know, retire, work long and hard and retire at the age of 65, work for 40 years and then you can retire. What if that roadmap that we've been given isn't the only option? Well, I found out that it's not the only option when I discovered the FIRE movement. And FIRE stands for, it's an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And this community of people literally cracked the code on how to not have to um, work 40 years and wait until you're 65 or older to enjoy life. These people figured out how to be able to achieve that far earlier than the traditional retirement age. And once I discovered that, it completely changed my outlook on how I view work and my outlook on personal finances and how I view valuing my time. So today I'm going to share with you my FIRE story and how it's continuing to influence my decisions that I am currently making today and going after the lifestyle that I truly want to live. And I just want to welcome you all back to the channel. If it's your first time here, thank you for stopping by. Thank you all for taking the time out to view the video. My name is Kayosha, and this is Proof and Prosper. And this is where we talk about designing the life that we truly want to live. And I'm just documenting it, my journey in doing that here for you to hopefully inspire some of you to start going after the things that you truly want in life, as far as the way you live your life and the type of work you do, um, and anything that would bring you more joy than what you're currently experiencing. So I'm going to hop right into my FIRE story. So to give you a little bit of a background without going too deep. So for me, I've actually always been pretty good at managing my money. Um, I worked at a very large bank, one of the big banks in the U.S., one of the bigger banks in the U.S. I worked at a bank for a few years, and I learned a lot about credit and debt and how that works. And so the lessons that I learned from doing that job had already shaped my views about debt. Like, I didn't necessarily view debt as bad. I just knew that it was not good to have a lot of debt, but I accepted it as just a part of life. People like to buy things and most likely they don't have enough money to buy it. So they, get a loan, or, you have student loans after you graduate, or, credit cards, right? Credit card debt. I just accepted that debt was just a normal part of life, right? And like I said, I had already been pretty good at managing my money. I always paid my bills on time. I learned a lot about credit working at the bank, and so I understood what needed to be done in order to keep a good credit score, right? Make sure you pay all your, whatever debt you have, make sure you pay all your bills on time. Don't have too much debt, the traditional stuff I learned from working at the bank. So I was always really good about managing my money because of that. And I had always been a good saver, but I used to save to be able to just to spend it on something, whatever it was that I was saving for. So I wasn't necessarily putting money as I wasn't saving, like, for retirement or for my future. I always had a specific, thing that I wanted to do, whether It was a nice pair of sneakers, or go to a concert, or go to some sort of event, take a trip. Whatever it was, I knew that okay, I can put money aside. I would give myself a little bit of a, however many how many ever many months to save that money, and I would save it, but then I'd spend it, right? And that's pretty much that was my relationship with money, management, right? I didn't know anything about investing. I always just thought it was something for extremely rich people, certain people, to be able to, invest. And that was pretty much the only idea I had about it. I never really had the desire to look into it because it always just seemed like it wasn't something that applied to me. And so I never did. And unfortunately, us, I'm a millennial. I guess, what would be considered a zennial, look like an older millennial. And we didn't really learn about money, or at least I know I didn't really learn about money, growing up. All of my money lessons came from just interacting, with my family, and just everyday life and what I saw on TV, right? So I really didn't have any type of real formal education when it came to personal finance. So I really didn't know anything about investing. And but like I said, I was always really good with managing my money, so I always did okay. But going through, like, once I graduated from college, it was just really hard to get like a good job. And out of college, I like I said, I worked at that bank, and I learned, everything about debt and credit. But I didn't really learn much else, right? So I had I hadn't, I was still young. I was in my 20s, and I really hadn't had a real good idea about what it is that I really wanted to do. After college, I graduated with a degree in business, but I didn't even really, honestly, at the time, didn't really 100% understand exactly what that even meant. I don't even know if I could tell you really today. I know I majored in marketing, and I just figured, okay, I'd be good at selling things, right? I sell things on a corporate level, right? And I think that was my idea of what I wanted to do, but I never got around to doing that. So, and you have these finance classes and stuff in college, but it's like corporate finance. It's not really, at least in my experience, it's not really personal finance on an individual level. It's always how to manage the books. It was, stuff like that. How to manage the books for like businesses and things of that nature. So still stuff that I guess in hindsight could still apply, would still apply to an individual, maybe to a certain extent. But yeah, still didn't learn anything about money. So initially just going through life, like, is just work. I was young, so I really didn't have a real clear, idea. I wasn't a fortunate one to know exactly what I wanted to do, like, at a very young age. I never really did, because honestly, I always wanted to, like, do something a bit more creative um as a younger person, but I ended up just falling in line like many people do. And I just, ended up just going to school, coming out, just trying to find a job, trying to make enough money to pay the bills. I just ended up doing, you know, what society expects you to do, unfortunately. And that carried with me. That carried with me throughout my military career, and up until, my late 30s. So that was pretty much how I moved, you know, through the world before fire. Now, I stumbled upon the fire movement um, during the pandemic, because we all had a lot of times on our hands. So, real quick, let me try to break it down. What the fire movement is. So, fire stands for, again, it stands for financial independence, retire early. And what that means is you save up, you amass enough wealth through savings and investments that your your investments grow to a certain amount, that will provide passive income that would be enough to cover your living expenses, right? However much that would, however much your expenses add up to. Excuse me, my voice is a little harsh. So to give you an example, so like basically you would, you're saving and investing, and the caveat to this is saving and investing aggressively, right? Because that's where the retire early part comes in, because you're saving and investing so aggressive that your money begins to grow at an accelerated rate. um, and you reach that number that you need in order for your investments to begin kicking off some passive income, enough either on a monthly or annual basis that you can use that money to pay for your life, and that's what the FIRE movement is. And the retire early piece, it just means retiring at an age substantially younger than the traditional age of like 65 years old. Like a lot of these folks that, following the FIRE movement, they're retiring in their like early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, depending on how young they start. But so that's pretty much what the FIRE movement is. And the driver behind FIRE is your FIRE number. And this FIRE number is based off of the 4% rule, which basically means that it's a study that was done, is based on a Trinity study where they studied all of these, different portfolios during like the stock market over through history. And they figured out that you can safely withdraw 4% from your investments each year for up to about 30 years successfully without, falling into dire straits, right? It will last you the 30 years to be able to live off of your investments without having to work. And how you calculate this number is you basically add up how much it costs you to live each year, or like annually, and you would either divide that number by 4%, 0.04, or you can multiply it by the number by 25. It gives you the same. So say, so an example would be, say you live off of $40,000 a year, right? According to the 4% rule, you would need to have $1 million saved and invested in order to be able to draw $40,000 a year from your investment safely for a period of about 30 years, right? And all you do is just multiply 40,000 by 25, and that's your FIRE number. So you might be like, dang, $1 million just for 40,000. That's crazy. Yeah, it is. But people were doing it. People were hitting their FIRE number quickly too, so that they can live off of that money. And so when I discovered this, it was it was very intriguing. It was an eyebrow raise, like, really, is people out here doing that, right? And I mean, there's different versions of FIRE, you know, depending on how luxurious you want to live. But just to be comfortable, right? We're just going with the regular. This is how much I live off of. Maybe with a little bit of room to do things. I'll add that into my annual cost, and this is the number I need to get. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, 40,000 a year is good. Because I expect to be, getting, you know, other income. So 40,000. But I was like, but dang, $1 million. Now, mind you, I'm just now discovering FIRE during the pandemic. This is the 2020, right? I hadn't turned 40 yet, so I'm just now really discovering FIRE at 39 years old. I'm 43 now. Okay, give you some context. Okay, so I'm like, when I'm learning about it now, mind you, when I first started learning about FIRE, um, I think I ended up stumbling upon it because like I was really into crypto and I was trying to learn how to invest, invest in stocks. Like me getting introduced to crypto through people that I work with spiraled into me trying to learn how to invest and what investing was, which spiraled into me stumbling upon the FIRE movement. Right? I can't quite pinpoint exactly what the specific thing was that put fire in front of me. It probably was just me, honestly, just going down a rabbit hole of looking up stuff online. But I had already picked up some bad habits from trying to get into crypto. Then I took a stock trading course to learn how to actively trade stocks because in my mind, you got to remember, I don't really know what investing is. So I'm doing all of this trial and error stuff, trying to figure out what is investing. And in my mind, it was investing was more like gambling, like trading stocks, and sometimes you might make a lot of money, sometimes you might lose money. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, and I kind of got into that for a while until I stumbled upon FIRE. And then when I actually learned what actual like investing was, I was like, okay, yeah. I went kind of crazy, and I was reading all these books and listening to a lot of audio books about FIRE, reading all kind of blogs, listening to a bunch of different podcasts. I was just trying to consume as much information as possible, which I tend to do when I'm super interested in something. I'll just go nuts and just consume as much information about it as possible. And that's what I did with FIRE. And honestly, initially I was actually still a bit skeptical because, like I said, I'm late to the game. $1 million just for 40 grand. Dang, that's a lot. And I really don't make that much now because a lot of the examples that I had come across, these people were having dual income salaries. So, they were married, or they had two incomes coming in that they could throw towards their goal. And if it wasn't that, they most likely were making a lot more money than I was making at the time. So it seemed a bit far fetched, one of the big things that really wasn't, that kind of turned me off is that these people were like depriving themselves extremely, like on how they live. Like they weren't going out to eat. They were extreme budgeting. Like they weren't spending money on anything, like the bare minimum, like sewing their clothes together, like all kind of stuff that I wouldn't voluntarily choose to do. Not even for saving a crazy amount of money. Like I still wanted to always just be comfortable. And for me, it doesn't take much even already because I am a minimalist. Like I really don't like having a lot of stuff because I'm so used to moving around a lot. So I tend to not even have a lot of stuff, and I'm not very materialistic either. So to me, being comfortable already didn't require much. And then you're telling me I would have to do even less. I wasn't feeling that. So I still was kind of skeptical about it. And but at least I learned about the main thing I took away from it initially. Now, mind you, I had consumed all the things and I loved the idea of being able to save a lot of money. And I just thought it was so fascinating that these people were able to do it so quickly and now they're just chilling. I love that, but being logical and bringing myself back to reality, still feeling like these people were super young when they did it. I'm about to be 40, and I don't think I would still be able to do it because that's a lot, and I don't really make that much, whatever, right? So I just had all of these things that were blocking it. And but the biggest thing initially that I took away from it was actually how to invest for retiring. And I put those practices into effect right away. I got a Roth account. I had made sure that I was signed up for the 401k at my job. I was contributing it. At the time, I was only contributing to the match because I really wasn't making a lot and I just really hadn't figured out exactly, how much I could, put towards, investing in a 401k that wouldn't mess with my lifestyle too much. So I just was contributing, to get the match. I had started that process. And to me, that was a big win because I wasn't even doing that. I had been going through life. I mean, my whole military career, I didn't invest one penny for my retirement. I didn't even know what in the military, and they have something called a TSP, thrift savings plan. That's your retirement fund. I didn't even know what that existed. I didn't know what that was. So I gone almost a decade in the military without even having invested for my retirement. And I mean, looking back on it now, I'm like, ugh, right? It just that was I could be so much further along, but I didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know. And I hadn't been exposed to anything that really put like told me about it while I was in. And I honestly I didn't really actually find out about it until later on in my military career when I was like getting ready to get out, and I was just like, oh well, well, it's too late now. There ain't no point in trying to do it now. I'm not. So I did find out what it was, but again, that was still when I was in the military. I had not found out about the FIRE movement or investing or anything. So even though I knew what TSP was prior to getting out, it wasn't still something that was just like in the forefront of my mind, honestly. So you know, the biggest initial takeaway from me discovering FIRE was actually beginning to invest and actually saving money for emergencies, right? Because remember, I told you I was really good at saving money, but I would save money to spend it, not for a future thing that may or may not happen. So those are the two biggest things that I did initially, discovering FIRE. And I still was kind of falling into my bad habits on like being more speculative with trading and stuff, because to me that was more exciting. um, Putting money away for my future self just wasn't exciting. So I was just doing the minimum that would suffice, right, initially. And I didn't really start really getting serious about saving for retirement and pursuing FIRE until about 2 years later, when I experienced burnout for the first time in my career. This was my initial career outside of, or my initial job outside of the Army, right? I'm in tech. I work in tech. And I was like, well, tech, getting out of the Army, well, tech, they make a lot of money. It sounds like their computers are everywhere, that sounds like something I could do, and I'll always have a job. So I picked tech, getting out of the Army, because that's not what I did in the Army. I did law enforcement in the Army. But in any event, so I got my first tech job, was there for a few years, almost 3 years, but I was going hard on um, being a high performer, right? I was, I worked my way up the ladder, you know what I mean? Promotion after promotion after promotion. And I was just working so super hard to get ahead, right? So I could make more money, so I could save a little bit more for retirement. And that's what I did, and that's all it was. But I hit a wall. I had worked so hard. I I started off making about 40,000 a year at that job, and by the time I left, I was making about 75 grand a year. And so I was able to grow my income so great in such a small amount of time, but I was working very hard to do it. And then I left that job and went into another job. And believe it or not, I took a pay cut because I thought that job that I had would set me up better for the future as far as job stability and things of that nature, which we all know now is an illusion. But then I didn't. I mean, and this is just more recently. This was just only in 2020 when we were able to start back working again. So yeah, I was trying to find the thing that would allow me to have a stable career, and that burnt me out too. Well, I hadn't quite gotten burnt out yet. By the time I finished that job, I was burnt out, and I didn't know this then. It's only in retrospect that I can look back and be like, oh dang, yeah, I was definitely burned out, right? But while I was going through it, I had no idea. I was just, I just knew I was exhausted. So I ended up leaving that job, and I went after another job. Like, I was just going back to back. I was just going hard, trying to get these jobs, trying to make this money so that I could, save more aggressively for my retirement, right? Put this money away for my retirement. And I did, and I ended up, and I'm gonna share this particular story for a different video, but I ended up getting another job, and I didn't last 2 months. I hit a wall. Like, I was so like exhausted mentally. It was just super hard for me to like get anything done. My usual of, coming in, being a leader, doing all the things, fixing all the things, doing all the things. Couldn't do it. Had no capacity for it. Couldn't focus on anything. Couldn't really get too much of anything done. So needless to say, I did not last. And um, that's when I started to really come back to fire. Started to go through the books that I initially inhaled. The three that stood out the most for me were The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, Quit Like a Millionaire by Christy Shen, and I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. These three books were probably the trifecta for me. Right, these books were the ones that stood out the most. I think those three books are the ones that I took the most away from. And yeah, so I went back to square one. And what ended up happening was I ended up taking a year off. I ended up taking a gap year to kind of figure out what it is that I need to do to try to, do what I need to do to retire early, right? I was so focused on the money piece that I wasn't really considering the time and location piece just yet. Even though in Quit Like a Millionaire, I got introduced to the term geographic or geo arbitrage, or geographic arbitrage, which is basically living somewhere that's substantially less expensive than where you currently live, based on whatever currency you earn in. So for us in the United States, with the U.S. dollar, you would just go somewhere where your dollar stretches a bit further, where it doesn't cost as much to live. Um, so whether, in that instance, I'm talking about, living outside of the United States, but you can do geographic arbitrage within the United States. Like, say you move from somewhere like, New York to somewhere like Ohio, where it costs you substantially less money to live in Ohio than it does, in New York City, right? So I learned about that, and that kind of started opening my eyes towards the possibility of actually living outside of the United States. Now, I'm talking about as just a regular everyday person. When I was in the Army, I actually was stationed in Europe for a little while. So I had already lived outside of the United States, but it was while I was in the military. So it was different, a little bit. So I was already introduced, and I already understood that was a thing, but that kind of brought me back to, well, dang, you could live outside of the country, and it could be a lot less money for you to do that. So I'm aiming for this $1 million. Now, do I really need $1 million if I consider living outside of the US, or living somewhere in the US where it doesn't cost that much to live? But everywhere in the US is really expensive. I mean, I know there's places that aren't, but anywhere that I'd want to live is going to be expensive. But so yeah, so now I'm recalculating and refiguring, maybe I don't need $1 million. Maybe I do okay with 500,000. Um, and so that's now my current goal, that's what I started, that became my goal. And So after I took my gap year, I ended up landing a job, and the job paid really well, and that's when I went in. That's when I really, really, really started saving and investing aggressively. And that's what I've been doing. And um, it's exciting, to see how far I've come from where I started, because I really didn't start really actually putting what I learned about fire into effect until maybe maybe a year after I learned about it. It took me about a good year before I actually really started investing for retirement, just in general. I still couldn't, even though I had learned all the things, I understood it really well. I knew what it meant. I still wasn't completely sold, because again, during that time, I'm like, there's no way I can know how much I'm going to need in the future. I know what I need now, but don't nobody know what the future holds. How are you supposed to know? So, okay, I guess you just use this number as a general guideline, but at the end of the day, you don't really know. So I just had to. I was fighting a lot of that, before I really um began to implement the things. And so now that brings us to today, and that's where I'm at. So the difference is, I was so focused on the financial piece that I hit a wall again, right? So now taking a step back, and I am going to put that trifecta back into play. Instead of just focusing on that financial piece, I'm focusing on that time freedom and that location freedom to go with that financial freedom. And to me, that at this point in my life, the those three things are necessary. Even if I'm not making as much money as I have in the past, if I can get that time freedom, which is having more control over my schedule, if not complete control over my schedule, to the location piece, being able to work from anywhere that I want to work from, whether it's here in the States or overseas. So now I am taking a step back and figuring out how to get all three of those pieces, right? And hopefully landing work, because I'm not ready to completely stop working. It would be nice. I don't think I get bored anytime soon. But I'm not necessarily completely ready to stop working, but I want to have more autonomy over my life, and putting those three pieces together. So, and revisiting fire, now I'm starting to consider other places that I want to live. None of them are in the in the U.S. And I just want to be able to, like I said, I'm not particularly ready to stop working completely, but I just want to have more um, autonomy over all of those aspects in my life. And for me, that's being able to hang out with my dog all day. He's with his grandma right now. But you know what I mean? Hang out with my dog, get my little bit of work done here, hang out with my dog all day, read some books, that's more the lifestyle that I want to live. That's whether I'm sitting on the beach side on my laptop, or chilling in a bungalow somewhere. You know what I mean? That's what I'm looking for. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm just looking for a vacation. I'm looking for to be somewhere where burnout isn't going to happen, where my nervous system is at rest for a change. And I genuinely feel fulfilled in the work that I do. So I just wanted to give you guys my fire story. I am still in pursuit of fire, and the retire early piece, for me, and it doesn't mean to completely stop working, because honestly, most of the personalities that I follow on social media and podcasts and things, they're still working. They're just not working traditional 9 to 5s. You know, they're running their own businesses, and so I take away from that the retire early piece just means becoming work optional, meaning that you don't have to work if you don't want to, because you are financially independent. You make enough money from your investments to pay for your lifestyle, and you just work because you want to, not because you have to. And so I'm taking that biggest piece with me as well, just becoming work optional. All right. And that's ultimately the end goal. And I think that should be everybody's goal, is to set yourself up to be work optional. You don't have to stop working, because we, at the end of the day, we're human. We need stuff to do, you know, whether it's through work or hobbies or what have you, human interaction, that thing, you know, just to keep us healthy and things of that nature. Um, but if you don't feel like working, you'd have the option to not work, you know? And I think that at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. And I just wanted to share that story just to give you kind of a bit of my fire backstory, my backstory in fire. But yeah, so thank you. If you're still here with me in this video, thank you so much for sticking around and to listen to my story. And hey, let me know in the comments, are you, or any of you, familiar with FIRE? Are any of you actually pursuing FIRE? Did I give you something, you know, new to think about, or you know, you know, maybe find out more about? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.